Welcome back. What's on the menu today? Well, salt beef. So, what's salt beef? Salt beef is actually a brined pickled beef. In the UK, the Brits call it salt beef. In the US, the Americans call it corned beef. And in there's a tale. So actually it's got nothing to do with corn at all. Well, a little bit. Basically they use a salt which is called corning salt. And the corning salt actually has kernels of grains of salt which are actually about the size of kernels of corn. So hence corned beef, which they use to make a Reuben. So what are we doing today? Corned beef, which is luscious, meaty, beefy, tender. And the first time I ever had this was actually in the UK with my mum. And you can eat it with our no-knead bread. Okay, the recipe will be here at the end. And a slathering of good English mustard because you need that bite. I guess you could also use wasabi. Someone try it with wasabi and tell me. And a bit of pickle. Look, if you want to be American, grate in some cheese and you've practically got a Reuben. I'd hesitate to call it an authentic Reuben just in case New Yorkers jump on me. Well, depends on who, which New Yorker, right? So, without much further ado, let's get going with salt beef. I don't think you can eat this at the end of the video. You've got to wait a few days.
The first thing you would do is actually prep all your spices, beginning with salt. I use a natural coarse rock salt, that's why it looks a little impure. Pepper does go in, black usually, but you could also use white if you don't have black. Definitely a good bunch of bay leaves and brown sugar. Yeah, I like bay. I also use coriander, coriander seeds that is, not powder. It's yummier that way and a bit more subtle. Here I'm actually showing curing salt, but you'll see it later on as well because it's important that you use curing salt and not just the normal salt. It's also called Prague salt. Brown sugar and a good grind of white pepper and I think that was also soy salt. About 4 liters of water. Now, having said that, I actually make this for sale too, so if anyone would like some and you're in the Kuala Lumpur area, hit me up. Otherwise, try and make this yourself. Obviously the pot I chose was way too small and it would have boiled over, so I put it in a larger pot. You also put in lots of garlic, but what you do is really quite simple. You just cut the garlic in half along the equator. Use a good tongue, and yes, that is ox tongue. That is my tongue. Look at it. That's about 1.3 kilos. It's actually more expensive than the brisket, surprisingly. I also put in some cardamom because I like cardamom and it gives it a nice warmth. Crush it a little bit so that it releases the flavor as you brine the beef. There's your curing salt, a Prague powder. You can get this off Amazon or Lazada. Not much, very little. It's actually kind of sodium nitrite. Shouldn't eat too much of it, but if you don't eat this all the time, it's fine. So there you go. Boil it up, and that's just to sterilize everything. But what I didn't show here was, please cool it down, otherwise you will poach the damn meat. Cool it down till it's warm to blood heat, and you can stick your finger in it. Put the garlic in just like that. Don't worry about it. You don't really need any peeling or anything. and then stick in the brisket. Now, I do it in this order because the tongue's really big and I had to curl it around the bottom. That bowl is really just to weigh everything down. You want to make sure everything's submerged. I did it the first time round and I had to turn it this way and that, and it was really bothersome. Cover it up and chuck it in the fridge. And why I love to cook is because it gives me time to be present, which is my topic for Time for Joy. Oh, hi! So, today's Time for Joy. Let's get stuck into it. Basically, it's one of the last, I think, topics on that listicle that I started like about 3 weeks ago. And we're here to talk about presentness. I mean, fitness is a given, so that was number 4 on that listicle. This is actually number 3. Presentness, what does that mean? Presentness is basically remaining in the moment. And yes, I'm looking through my notes. I'm also typing up my notes and doing some other work besides. Now, our mind is our best friend if it's trained, or it could be our worst enemy. And I think some of you know what I'm talking about. You don't get a reply immediately on your WhatsApp. Oh my God, my boyfriend or girlfriend is angry with me. You get blue ticked and you think, oh, he's definitely angry with me, or she's definitely angry with me. Why are they ghosting me, right? These are all little things that your mind is telling you. It's not necessarily the truth. Sometimes it could be true, but sometimes it actually is your mind just telling you these things, because one thing I've learned is that your mind hates a vacuum, so it needs to fill it in with a story. Being present and remaining in the present was actually a hard road for me, because we're all taught to plan and live in our futures and see our futures. What's your dream? Then we're taught to plan for the problems or see difficulties and challenges along the way and learn from the past when we made mistakes and then mull over those wrongdoings. You see where I'm going. Basically, all the while feeling worse and worse, because all we see is the bad stuff. And honestly, that's what we're trained to see. We exercise this doom muscle the whole time. Oh, okay, what's that? Anyway, we exercise this doom muscle the whole time. And then we're surprised why our minds lead us down this path. So, I'm here to tell you about my little journey about learning what I could to overcome this. So it's no wonder I was a basket case of cases. It is difficult to unlearn a whole behavior, but it is possible. And it starts with doing something really, really silly. Basically, you vocalize to yourself. So if your mind's leading you down a path of horridness, you need to just get over the silliness and awkwardness of doing this. And trust me, the first time you do it, it's going to be really, really cringy. But you need to say it out loud and yell it if possible. You need to tell yourself, stop thinking that shit, and literally yell it out. If you feel awkward or funny or silly doing it, I wouldn't advise you doing it in a packed lift / elevator. But find a place where you can do this comfortably and say it out loud. For whatever reason, hearing your voice, even if you say it yourself, is very different from just thinking it. Then once you've done that, and you may have to repeat this a few times, actively do something different once you've done that. Nothing introspective. Don't sit and think some more. Your mind's just hit a speed bump. You don't want it continuing it down that road. So go do something that will lead you down a different path. Best thing is, of course, exercise. So the fitness portion in those listicles. But otherwise, anything active, cook something, do a bit of gardening, walk the dog, anything. It basically helps if your body is in motion, and actually breaks that thought pattern. It actually, if you think of yourself as a train of thought, it actually hits that sort of, what do they call those things? You pull the lever and it changes tracks. That thing. Leave a comment down below to tell me what that thing is actually called. So the other thing is, this is a new habit, a new muscle. It requires mindfulness, but as with all muscles, the more you exercise it, the more it actually gets into a habit. And then eventually you find you do it all the time. I think I'm a little bit more positive and optimistic these days than I used to be. In any case, I'll leave you with this cliche, which is courtesy of Kung Fu Panda. And a cliche is just, after all, a well-used truth. Yesterday's the past, tomorrow's the future, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present.
That humming is actually the refrigerator fan. Now, all you have to do after all that brining is take it out. That lid is actually really useful, so I put the bowl on top of it, so I don't get any meat juices in it. Now, all you do is chuck it into the pressure cooker pot. Clear out all the spices that you've got in your brine, and then add more of the same spices into the pressure cooker pot with some of the brine. You can also use fresh water if you so choose. It's not going to be any less salty. So pound all your cardamom and have at it. Do the same with the garlic again, and as you can tell, I really love my garlic, so I add 2 whole bulbs. 1 is actually enough. Sprinkle everything on, and the next thing you know, all you need to do is pour in the water and set the pressure cooker. Now, it's important at this point to note, I actually put too much water into my pressure cooker this time. I sort of disregarded the max limit. Thank God it didn't explode or anything. But having said that, we are setting the pressure cooker timer for about 50 minutes to an hour. Now, here it says 40 minutes. But actually I left it for about 50 minutes to an hour. And as you can see, it was a little overflowy, but thank God it didn't explode. There it is. All you have to do now is slice it up into thin little slices. Don't worry too much about that pink. Basically what happened there is your curing salt cured the meat juices in the fat, and all the fat has floated up to the top. That's the tongue. Now, where the tongue is concerned, don't forget to peel off that skin. Once you peel off that skin, it's good to go, and it is really the most tender portion of this salt beef thing that I'm doing. It's so yummy. I'm only using the tongs because it is straight out of the pressure cooker and it was really hot. I would not recommend this. Please do it after it's cooled down a bit. Also, this was footage from one of my earlier rounds of salt beef, and I hadn't given it enough time for the Prague
powder to actually go all the way through. I think this batch was about 4 or 5 days. Ideally 6 days is good. That's the tongue. This was really just tender. Don't worry if it's like this and it turns a little or it's just a little gray. It's still perfectly fine to eat. The pink the salt, the curing salt actually preserves that pinkness, but that's all it does. The coloring of the middle is actually all well and good. It's fine to eat. This is how I like to do my salt beef sandwich. So this is my no-knead bread with a bit of butter and of course a good squirt of QP mayonnaise and good English mustard, a huge dollop. Layer it on thick. It should be at least about 80 to 100 grams of meat per sandwich. Don't worry about it being too salty. It really isn't, surprisingly enough. I think that's because of the process of, the scientific term is osmosis. I eat it with a bit of pink onions and gherkin, which is traditional, and the British, at least the salt beef you get in Selfridges, is actually just English mustard without the rest. And taste test. Missed this.
And cut.
Thanks for joining us this week, and please like and subscribe to help the channel grow.